to move on to the panel discussion. And today's theme is to figure out what is going on in the cloud computing world, and also, what the future will be in this cloud computing and business infrastructure.
Got your crystal ball?
Yeah.
Sweet.
And one thing which was already revealed is like Salesforce.com is not going to change their name, and we want to figure out more about like what the future will be. So let me start with the first question. So now that like I remember in 2006, Eric Schmidt said cloud computing, and now it's already after being as a buzzword, it's cloud computing. It's getting more and more conventional, and a lot of companies already adopted cloud computing. So I guess like there are some companies who will utilize the cloud computing environment or your service, and there are other companies who are not really good at utilizing the actual advantage of the cloud computing. So among the countless number of your clients, what are the common features, do you think, of those who better leverage your service or cloud service generally?
I end up speaking to audiences of business people, IT executives, and they tend to fall into two categories. Those who embrace the cloud generally view technology as an enabler of competitive advantage. They seek to differentiate themselves from their competitors by leveraging technology in whatever business they find themselves. I had the pleasure of spending some time with the CIO of the company that makes all the cereal boxes in the US. Cheerios, that paperboard packaging, Coca-Cola 6-packs, that long 24-pack of Coke, they make that one too. And from his point of view, he's selling a commodity, so he needs every possible advantage to differentiate himself. And he viewed the use of cloud technology as a tremendous enabler of competitive differentiation. And so he was using lots of different kinds of cloud technologies in lots of different ways, as David said, to enable him to connect with his vendors, with his customers, with his partners, with his colleagues, faster and in a higher quality and more secure way than he was able to without using the cloud. And that I think, is the big differentiator. Those who view technology as a competitive weapon are rapidly adopting cloud-based technologies because it enables a huge amount of differentiation. And those who view technology as sort of a necessary evil, or who are scared of losing their job, because many IT professionals view the cloud as being very threatening, are shying away from it.
Yeah, I would say 100% agreement in that. That's what we see as well. I think it might be interesting to turn the question around and say, what are we seeing as kind of the remaining barriers? Because it's funny that over the last, my time in the cloud computing business, it's been almost like waves, and the waves are moving at different speeds in different countries around the world. So you see, for example, in the US, with a cowboy mentality, forget about the safety and security, man, we're going to do this. We're just going to do this right now because it's easy and it'll save me money, right? And then in Europe and in Japan as well, very thoughtful, and let's really think about this, and let's evaluate it, and let's make sure that it's going to be good for us and we're not going to get burned. And so we've seen that over the last 8 years of this wave of kind of acceptance. And so it's no longer that people are saying, I'm not going to use it. The remaining issues that you deal with are things like data residency issues, where by law, the contact information for a Swiss citizen cannot be stored in a data center outside of Switzerland. Right? So how can I have a cloud computer in a data center in the United States or in Tokyo when I need to store data about a Swiss citizen? And it's not even legal issues in some cases from a law, legislation perspective, but from contract law. There's a company in Ontario, Canada, there's a toll road called 451, I think, Toll Road 451 in Ontario, Canada, and the contract for that toll road says that the billing information for users of the toll road cannot be stored outside of Ontario, Canada. You can't even store it in British Columbia, which is in the same country. It's got to be in Ontario, and that's a contractual requirement. So a lot of what we're seeing in the final stages of cloud computing, taking over the world and storing everybody's data really is the final remnants of legal issues, contractual issues, and the laggards really coming in and trusting us with the data. And as I said earlier, it's in some cases it's a matter of I trust you with my sales data, but I will not trust you with my inventory data yet. So there's different sensitivity to different kinds of data. And so between the legal issues and the sensitivity issues, it's a little bit slower to change, but eventually it will happen.
Thanks. So I'd like to ask another question about so first Dan. As down the road, there are more and more companies will adopt cloud computing, and currently many still there are so many companies who have yet to adopt the cloud computing. So the fact itself that this company adopt the cloud computing in various service can be a differentiator. So but down the road, if all the company adopted cloud computing, so can it still be differentiator, combination, what kind of combination they adapt in terms of the various service, or what do you think of that?
I mean, obviously, as waves of technology move through industry, the ability to leverage the new technology as a differentiator diminishes. So there was a time when if you were a construction company and you had those Nextel phones that worked as walkie-talkies and the other guy didn't, then you could win contracts that he couldn't win because you could move information around more easily. Or you were a car company and you had Navi in your cars and your competitors didn't, you would sell more cars. I think it's inevitable that the cloud will be the way we all do computing. In fact, I think we would agree, and our companies have a fabulous relationship, and a lot of it's based on a very shared vision of the future, that 20 years from now, there aren't going to be any corporate data centers. The cloud is so much better in so many ways that it's inevitable that it will become the de facto mode of implementing IT capability. But I think for the next 5 or 10 years, there will still be leaders and laggards. There will still be leaders who are more thoughtful and less thoughtful about the applications they choose and the way they choose to integrate those applications into their business processes. And so there will still be differentiation driven by this.
I think I would characterize it as saying that the culture of the company is that the technology acts as an amplifier. And so what you see is if the corporate culture is broken, or if the business processes inside a company are broken, and then you automate it, then it's like driving a broken car faster into a wall, right? And so a lot of the companies don't get the technology, or they attempt to use it, but they'll use cloud computing the same way they use the other computing. And in a lot of cases with new technologies, no matter what it is a replacement technology, but it's not a one-for-one replacement. You can't just use this new tool the same way that you use the old tool. The new tool is better because you're using it slightly different for a different purpose. And so we see things like, we have this one product, again I'll go back to Chatter, but you could say Yammer, any other of these internal social media tools for companies. Forget about whose brand it is. Some companies adopt this tool and it acts as an afterburner that makes them go faster and makes them go better. And they just adopt it really quickly and become superpowers, And some companies, they adopt the technology as in the IT department makes it possible to use the technology, but the company's culture doesn't make that technology successful. So forget about the technology. Think of it as a tool. You're giving a tool to somebody that knows how to use the tool, that wants to use the tool. Man, they just take it and go to town. You give that tool to somebody that doesn't really want the tool, they'll take it, but they'll just kind of, you know. And one of the interesting things in Japan that I've seen, to make it a lot more specific to this group, the culture of Japan, I think, is changing very quickly. But 20 years ago, the idea that the lowest level person in a company could express their ideas to the CEO. Can you imagine the entry-level worker at Mitsui telling the CEO of Mitsui what they think? Really what they think? You know, so the tools sometimes have to be appropriate for the culture that they're being brought into. Now, I've seen the new startup companies in Japan. The new companies in Japan are taking a new attitude and changing things, and they're adopting these things and using these kinds of tools. But if the culture doesn't fit with the product, it's not going to work.
Thanks. That's really interesting point. And like you have.
I was just going to, I mean, there are several trends that are all interrelated here. There's the mobility trend, there's the cloud trend, and there's the consumerization of the enterprise trend. And when you put it all together, you get really astonishing outcomes. We have one customer, it took them about 2 months to deploy 48,000 seats of our service. And they have almost 50% 7-day actives among those 48,000 users. Now, think about that in the context of your typical enterprise IT deployment. First of all, the idea that you would deploy 50,000 seats of something in 2 or 3 months is inconceivable. But the idea that half of those people would be using it every week 2 months later is also almost inconceivable, because traditional enterprise software has been hard to use and required a lot of training, and it was sort of like, you have to use this to implement this business process. But these modern tools, these modern enterprise software capabilities, because they feel like Twitter or Facebook or YouTube and are very easy to use, they almost get pulled into the enterprise by the workforce rather than imposed by IT on the workforce. And in fact, this was Salesforce's, among their many great innovations, this was perhaps the most important, this idea that you could sell enterprise technology to the VP of marketing or the VP of sales instead of to the CIO, and then allow the business to pull that technology in rather than having it imposed by the IT organization. And when you put all this together, it's driving tremendous change across the global enterprise.
Yeah, thank you. And I'd like to dig a little deep down about like David's point about corporate culture. So, like as you mentioned a little bit about like Japanese culture and Dan is mentioning a changing trend. So, like I'd like you to talk a little bit more about, like, since you guys have experience both in Japan and the US. So, we'd like to ask you about like difference between like Japan and the US in terms of the adaptation or utilization of the cloud computing, and maybe like Japan culture is changing obviously, and like it depends. But like, for example, what about like very traditional big Japanese companies and very rapidly growing Japanese ventures against US companies?
One of the things I noticed, and this is also kind of a barrier that you brought up in the earlier presentation. You said that one of the knocks against cloud computing was that it wasn't customizable enough. You couldn't make it your own. One of the things I think Salesforce did fairly well, and people don't, in some cases, they don't know we have a platform, because it's like, where is the platform? Well, the platform is what allows you to customize Salesforce.com. It's just embedded as part of the service. One of the things about Japan that is very different than I think the US is Japan has very much a build it yourself kind of mentality. That I'm not going to buy off the shelf software. I'm not going to buy shrink wrap software because my business is different than others. And if I don't buy it, if I don't build it myself, then it's not going to do exactly what I want it to do. And so that has been part of the reason that cloud computing hasn't been wildly embraced. Is a lot of the cloud computing solutions do a very good job, but they don't allow you to completely customize it. And so I think that is a cultural difference that I see in Japan. US companies in some cases are more willing to change the way they work. They're almost, we see this sometimes today with medium-sized companies where they say, you know, instead of us giving you the requirements for our sales process, you guys are the experts in sales. Tell us how we should be selling. You know, please tell us what our process should look like, and then just give us a tool that does that. But I would never see that with a Japanese company. The Japanese company would say, this is how we sell, this is what we need your product to do this. And so our job is to say, hi, and make it work. Make it work, right?
So first, a little bit of background. I have been fortunate enough to do business in Japan for 3 different companies over the course of my career. My first visit to Tokyo was in 1988. I've been in Japan 3 times this year as we work to establish Box KK, and we were recently fortunate enough to hire a country manager and kick off our operations in Japan with a couple of great partnerships, including one that we've already talked about, and the other, a relationship with CTC. But I would not say by any means that I'm an expert on Japan or on Japanese cloud computing, and I should make that clear. I do see some very interesting trends in the Japanese market, and on each of these week-long trips, I have about 35 meetings, so I've had almost 100 meetings in Japan in this year. And there's some very interesting things going on. I actually really believe that Japan should be the most rapid adopter of cloud-based technologies in the world. And the reason is this: Japanese companies excel at teamwork. That is a great strength of Japanese business culture. A group of people working together to accomplish amazing things. But historically, technology has not been a very good enabler of that kind of business culture. In fact, technology in Japanese businesses has been a little isolating in most cases, and has typically been implemented by a systems integrator sort of coming in from the outside. But these cloud-based technologies enable collaboration, enable teamwork, enable communication in a way that's never been possible using technology before. And when you marry that up with 2 big trends in Japan, one very fortunate, which is the increasing globalization and international competitiveness of Japanese companies, which creates the need to extend these Japanese business processes across groups of people who live and work very far away from each other. And a very unfortunate reality, which was the disaster that focused everybody's attention on the fact that having this stuff in your data center is not always any safer than it is to have it in some other data center. We see these 3 forces together driving adoption of the cloud much more rapidly in Japan than was true, say, 5 years ago.
Thank you. That is really encouraging. Whereas, like, you know, I need to hustle with you leveraging teamwork. Well, like,